so it must be 6:30. So off we go. So I think everybody knows I'm Paul Harper, the chair of this committee, and I'd like to welcome everybody, and if anyone is there listening virtually, to this meeting of the Planning and a Healthier, Stronger Communities Policy Advisory Committee. Couldn't get much of a longer title than that, but I'm sure we could try for next year. So tonight we're going to broadcast it live, unlike last night when the whole system packed up. And I just want to check if anybody else wants to record it at all tonight. No, Malcolm's not here. No. Then the other thing we know is the fire alarm. So if the fire alarm rings, Cassie and I'm sure some of the other officers will shoot off and check what's going on, and then they'll come back and let us know whether we need to leave the building or whatever. Which then brings us on to item 1, apologies for absence. So I can see we're missing 2 people at the moment, but do we actually have any apologies? I don't think, no, okay. And then in that case, we can't have notification of any substitute members if we don't have any apologies. That's that one. And then urgent items, really just to refer to the fact that there was a very small item sent out in terms of a paragraph number. I think that was sent out last week, wasn't it, Castle? Yeah. Okay. Notification of visiting. Right. Notification of visiting members. Well, can't see any, and I've not been told of any, so that's fine. Or, oh, sorry, Councillor Nagy. So I thought you were here as a member of the cabinet. You are. Doesn't well. I don't mind. Sorry. Yeah. Well, I was going to invite you as a cabinet member as well. Wait a minute. That's 9, isn't it? And then any disclosures by any members or officers in terms of tonight's papers? No. Any disclosures of lobbying? Yeah. Councillor Conrad.
Thank you, Chair. I've been lobbied on item number 10 regarding KPIs.
Thank you for that. Anybody else been lobbied or not? No? Great. And to consider whether any item should be taken in private because of the possible disclosure of exempt information. As you'll see from our papers, we do have a 1-page exempt appendix for item 15, which when we get there, if people want to discuss the relevant item, that part of the item will have to go into private session, but we'll see how we get on when we get there. So, then on our papers, so minutes of our meeting held on the 6th of December, 4th of December. What? Well, it says 4th.
Oh, 4th, sorry.
Yeah, that's a 4th. Yeah, the 9th I was at a party. I wasn't here. So page, if I just shoot through for accuracy, page 1, 2, 3, and 4. In which case, is everyone happy that these are correct record of our last meeting? Excellent. I shall sign those at the end. And then on to number 9, which is page 5, which is the forward plan relating to the committee's terms of reference, kicking off on page 5. So, oh, okay, yeah. Before we go on to page item 5, item 9. Can I just check with Councillor Povey if you've got any disclosures or any lobbying?
I don't. Apologies for lateness. There was an accident down my road.
Oh dear. Okay, so well, thank you for that. So if we go on to page 5 to 12, which is the forward plan, and has any member from the cabinet anything they'd wish to add? Is this one of the ones Councillor Nagy wanted to say something? I thought he said item 9, but I thought he meant the events. But he's not there, is he? Okay, assuming he doesn't want to say anything to it. Anybody from the cabinet or committee wish to say anything on this on the forward plan tonight? No, if not, can we agree to note it? Okay, which brings us on to agenda item 10, which is the corporate strategy year 2 action plan, key performance indicators, pages 13 to 30. And before the report is introduced, we have a public speaker, Mr. Ben Darlington. And I think, as you know from last night, Mr. Darlington, you have 3 minutes to address us, but if you'd just like to perhaps introduce yourself first of all. Yeah, you can have 30 seconds to tell us who you are, and then you have your 3 minutes.
Hi, so good evening. Yes, name's Ben Darlington. Declarations are, I'm a member of the Green Party, but I'm here as an individual. This is definitely not Maidstone Green Party stuff. I'm also going to be talking about nature connectedness, and I've been working for 2 years on tech to do with measuring nature connectedness in and around Maidstone, but I'm doing that independently and funded by voluntary donations. I am not seeking and will be not be seeking any support or involvement from Maidstone Borough Council. So this is not a pitch. Right. Okay, so just clarify, by nature connectedness, I mean the way people notice and aware of and benefit from nature. There's a bucket of research, and I think we all intuitively understand it's good for you, and there is identified correlation between mental health and nature connectedness. So I won't dwell on that. Bit I want to pick up on is new research showing that nature connectedness is not just good for individuals, it's good for social cohesion. You get a lot of pro-environment, pro-social behaviours, and actually it leads to a sense of safety and potentially economic growth. So it is quite a significant thing. That research is just emergent. There's also very new research indicating that while doorstep nature, i.e. nature in the town, is really good for you, destination nature, where you travel and then come back, may actually have a negative effect. So that's emergent research, but there's something that's verifying that doorstep nature really matters. Okay, now there's an awful lot going on in Maidstone around tree planting, nature recovery, greening of Maidstone. So there's a temptation to think we don't need to worry about this because we're doing an awful lot in terms of nature recovery. There are 2 problems today, maybe not. One is nature blindness. People just don't see it anymore. And there's another one called nature avoidance, which is just beginning to be understood. Sheffield have noticed, for example, that parks that are good for nature are not used particularly well by people. Again, won't dwell on that, just to say there's something going on there. Right, now the plan, the corporate plan and the KPIs, what's significant in the plan, and it is surprising, is there is nothing anywhere in the plan looking at how people and nature are relating to each other. If you look at your KPIs and your action plan, it's possible to meet all of the nature recovery objectives and for all the KPIs, relevant KPIs, to go green without in any way affecting people. People are just not in the picture. In fact, it's almost kept separate. Practically, you can do stuff about this. Doesn't require a whole rejig. I'll just give you 3 examples. Simple example 1 is you are targeting all nature reserves to have management plans. You could just check those management plans for some element related to nature connectedness, i.e. are they being used to build nature connectedness? On schools, you could be looking at foot routes to school and saying, are we using those routes to build nature connectedness? Doesn't cost anything. More ambitious thing, maybe related to this committee on housing, you could be looking at the number of houses or occupancies where the occupant has access to growing space of at least 1 square metre, i.e. opportunity to grow a plant, grow a herb, do something. In closing, I just want to say that there's a temptation to think that nature recovery in an urban area is about nature. It's about looking after nature. It's about helping nature. It's not. There are other areas that are a much better place to do that. Nature in an urban environment should be about helping people to reconnect with nature because the wider social benefits are massive. And at the moment, it is completely missing from Maidstone's action plan and KPIs. I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. And you kept within your 3 minutes. So that was good. So thank you. Just hold on. I'm just thinking that 'cause last night at the corporate pack, when Mr. Darlington introduced his item again, we then had actually a discussion just on that before we then moved on to the remainder of the papers. But perhaps if I ask at this stage, for Councillor Jeffrey to introduce the report, and then when we go on to debate, first of all, perhaps we'll address the issue raised by Mr. Darlington and then debate the remainder of the report if we do it sort of that way, I think. So over to you, Stuart.
Thanks, Paul. As the committee be aware, remember we adopted our corporate strategy last year now, isn't it? 11 months ago. We had a year one action plan, which we're coming to the end of. There were 30 actions in there, and we produced a report a few months ago to come through PACS showing progress against each of those, and I do feel there was good progress against the vast majority. So as we go into what's year two of the corporate strategy delivery, we have got a new action plan, which you've got in your PACS, that builds upon the year one. We've sat down, we've looked at how we refocus stuff, where the bits we put back a year and so forth. So we're continuing the strong emphasis around nature and helping people, those who most need it. And obviously right at the start, we've got the elephant in the room, which is local government reorganisation. There are the action plan kind of sits between two tiers of documents. As I say, at the top you've got the corporate strategy, we've got the action plan underneath, and then you've got things like the climate change and biodiversity strategy, which certainly pick up some of the points that Mr. Darlington made, but probably not all of them. We are, in terms of other key bits in here, you've got stuff like the deliberative engagement work, the year two part of that, which we're making sure we continue with, the community cohesion and safety strategy, and making sure we funded that properly. And then at a final bit on the paper, you've got the KPIs. Now the KPIs relate to the strategy rather than the action plan. So they're measuring how we're doing against the wider strategy, not against the individual points within there necessarily. And we did have a bit of conversation yesterday about how we might want to try and build in some KPIs or in terms of reporting, as we did this year on the year one, making sure we've got more metrics that we report on in terms of the action plan, and we're giving that some thought. I'll hand over to Angela for all the bits I've missed.
Okay, well, thank you for that. So perhaps before we go and discuss the sort of the written paper part, if I just wondered if anyone wanted to raise any points or based on the presentation we'd heard from Mr. Darlington. Yeah, and I've got Joe and then Claudine. Sorry, brain going dead. Yeah. Councillor Wilkinson.
Thank you. I was interested in the comment about the housing and how we could incorporate having spaces for people in their flats and stuff like that, and in our own housing policy. And this is regarding the Earl Street Improvement Scheme. I was going to mention this at that time, but it's kind of in keeping, because I think it would be really good if there was an emphasis on nature within that scheme, say green, you know, florals, plants, living walls, etc., to make, you know, the high street more attractive and more green.
Thank you for that. Councillor Russell.
I just really wanted to say thank you to Mr. Darlington for taking time out to come and give us his views tonight. I think it's really interesting when we get other viewpoints, not from people always sitting in this room. So thank you. The bit that stood out for me, obviously being a farmer, was the growing space that he mentioned. And I just thought, you know, I know we talk about greening for other purposes, but I'm not sure that we ever really capture necessarily the space for people to grow their own foods, or, you know, stuff like kind of community allotments or things like that. So I that actually just stuck in my mind. I thought that was a really good point. So I didn't know if that was something that we could potentially take forward. And if we are fundamentally, among everything we do, we are the housing authority, aren't we? So whether there could be something that we do in terms of that, picking that up with particularly the developments that we would be doing ourselves as the Borough Council. I just thought that was a really good point. So hopefully that will be taken up by Cabinet and the administration going forward. Thank you.
Okay, before I take you, Brian, I was going to just say a couple of things. I mean, I listened to it yesterday and had a chance to think more about it. And actually your point, Claudine, about allotments, I think is very good. And just a slight aside, when I first became chair at Merton Leisure and Libraries, I pushed through some unorthodox policies, actually on allotments, ironically, but called them leisure gardens. But that's by the by. I think there's really a lot there to consider, this whole idea of nature connections. And I wondered perhaps when we make our recommendations to the Cabinet on the report tonight, whether we might want to potentially add an extra recommendation along the lines of that the Cabinet give consideration to preparing a strategy and action plan on the benefits of nature connections, because it could pick up points Joe's mentioned and the points Claudine's mentioned, and some of the other points Mr. Darlington was talking about, because especially in the urban area, we see front gardens typically vanishing if there's space to fit a car in. We see street trees being removed. So, you know, our streets in a lot of the urban area become what they used to call sort of ecological deserts. And people's access to just even a square metre of nature is reducing. So I just wonder, as I say, and I probably will move it as an amendment when we got into the recommendations, to ask the Cabinet to look at preparing a strategy and action plan. Obviously, needs some research needs to be done into it, further discussions, but I think there's a real lot of benefit in this whole issue, which I think over the course of next year we could perhaps consider. Anyway, I'll take at this stage Councillor Clark, and then I'll come back to Councillor Harwood and Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Chairman. I really just wanted to point out that I think it's great that it's been raised, but there are so many ingredients across the borough, and if there is a need, if officers feel there's a need to just pull those out in our strategy, I don't think that this is I think we should be very mindful of it, but it's not that we're starting from ground zero. I mean, I'm a trustee at Hell Park Nature Reserve, and many similar organisations across Maidstone are looking at how we can connect with residents, people. We're fortunate in one sense because we are right on the urban edge. So when we had lockdown, we were able to, the reserve was a great resource for people to do their exercise and that sort of thing. But also we've got many people that live near the reserve that have flats, and or they may not have the space to put out bird boxes and things. And when we do we're just one of many events, but let's say our annual summer event, we typically work with residents to build up to sort of between 30 and 45 bird boxes or bat boxes, depending on what they want to do, working with the children. And they can either put those at their home or they can find a place in the reserve to put them. So I think that type of thinking is going on with all these different organisations. I think we're sort of looking at ways in which we can connect with residents, and especially those that may not necessarily. We have people right next door to the reserve that come to our summer event and say, "Oh, we never even knew this was here." So I think there's always more that we can do, but I think we've actually got a very strong basis amongst the various organisations across the borough. Maidstone Big Day Out, for instance, that's all about connecting people with nature. So I just think that we've just got to make sure that we're putting those threads into the strategy documents. Thank you.
Before I come to the Cabinet members, because Councillor Keeley just indicated she'd like to speak, then you've got everybody's views to respond to. Okay, Claire. I'll come on to Richard Conyard.
Thank you. Sorry, I had a moment of inspiration there. it was interesting what Mr. Darlington said and about the space for people's homes, especially with, like, as Councillor Russell said, we are a housing authority. Is there a possibility of a list of the things like Brian said about there are things already going on? Have we got a comprehensive list of what there is? And are there any community growing gardens anywhere? I think there's one at Shepway. Are there any more anywhere? Does anybody know about? Is it worth having a list of things so that we can see, rather than reinvent the wheel, so that we can boost what there is rather than necessarily create new things to tick boxes? Does that make sense? I don't know what we've already got. Thank you.
Councillor Conyer.
Thank you, Chair. I would just want to back up your request to Cabinet, but also I'd like to strengthen that. Having heard the discussion last night, I'm aware that some of the proposed KPIs that were mentioned last night, we're not collecting data on. There is no usable data for that. But without knowing what KPIs we do have access to, it is very, very difficult. There also are huge numbers of factors to consider. If we are just looking at plain numbers, and having a list of numbers on a dashboard for most of us probably wouldn't be too helpful. So I'd like to go beyond what you've suggested, that as a KPI or as an indicator really, for those that we're looking at a qualitative level rather than just a quantitative level. It's one thing to say we have got XYZ number of vertical gardens, for example. It's another to say, right, let's work those out, let's work where they are they in the best places, what is the density of those? I mean, there are bits and pieces in the plan that we're looking at anyway. There are some great stuff going on. I think it would be unfair to say that we are not doing those, because we are. And also there's plans to do more, which is absolutely fantastic. But to get a sort of quality aspect on that, to then be able to focus and say, right, well, we're doing okay here in the borough. So, for example, we're talking about Earl Street later. That sounds as if it's going to be fantastic. But what are we necessarily doing in Marden for those? What are we doing when we come out of the town centre? Can we start thinking about aspects with those? And it's just a request through to Cabinet. Thank you.
Thank you for that. If I take Councillor Thompson first and Councillor Harwood.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Darlington. On page 21 of your papers, you'll notice that under my responsibilities as Cabinet Member for Healthy Stronger Communities, we are delivering a healthier borough through health in all policies. I suggest that is the certainly one of the major headings under which we can absorb this good advice. Longer serving members will remember that my first speeches and wafflings on in this room were about whether or not we've got the right KPIs and whether or not they were generating right sort of data and such like. As a longer standing man, it reminds me of the lack of value of being asked to check whether I've used 3 particular words in addressing my wife on a daily basis. The KPI doesn't necessarily tell us the thing that we want to know. So I'm confident that our developing health in all policies procedure will capture the specifics in terms of green housing environments of our places in Maidstone being quality places to live. We were looking at new data today, updating 2019 data to 2025 on the health of our living environment. Indeed, in some of our more deprived areas in the town, we noted that there are some real positives to be celebrated there. Nevertheless, in work with officers, we'll be looking for more ways to capture this, and if there is scope for pertinent and focused KPIs, I'm sure that's a question that we can include in that conversation. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Harwood.
Thank you, Chairman. I think we all actually agree that Maidstone is an acknowledged leader in the field of urban wildlife and indeed wider ecosystem services. You know, right in the centre of the town, we've got nature reserves like the River Len Local Nature Reserve, where local people are involved day to day with caring for the site and keeping a watchful eye over it. We have other sites like Butland Hill, Pocket Nature Reserve, where it's all apartments and flats that are around that development, and it's just lovely that the children say, Mum, can I go and look at the ponds? I look at the nature reserve, because they've not got a garden and so on. So I think we are doing that, and I think each of those reserves talks about Hale, but I could just as much say Fan Wildlife Area, Local Nature Reserve, or the sites at Penton Heath, Allington, and elsewhere. That they are getting on very much with that contact with nature and involving the local communities. There are some other really good projects going on. There's a Swift Street initiative that is in its genesis at the moment, which will be rolled out in Penton Heath and Fant wards, which are the two strongholds for Swifts within the borough. And that, again, it's all predicated upon community outreach and community engagement, and that's working with the High Wheeled Swifts group. So I think there's lots going on, and just to move on to the growing space. I remember when I was first a councillor, I was chair of the allotments advisory group that we used to have. Maidstone does operate its own allotment gardens, which many other local authorities do not. And there are new allotments coming on stream all the time, most recently in Hermitage Lane, and the development there next to Fulling Wood, to Fuller's Wood. So there are things going on, and also that is tied into spatial policy. We have policies around delivery of allotments. We have policy around gardens and access to gardens and so on. One piece of work that we did probably 15, 20 years ago now, when it was quite a significant item in the news, was around Natural England's accessible natural green space standard. And it was really interesting because actually a lot of our urban areas had more accessible natural green space than our rural areas. And it was places like Marden, that's already been mentioned, there was a paucity of accessible natural green space. So I wouldn't want us to be tunnel vision only on the urban area, because frankly, the urban area has got Moat Park, Vinters Park, it's got lots of green space. It's very difficult finding green space in some of our villages. So I think we need to just think about communities and communities' contact with nature. And it is important for all the reasons that were rehearsed. But I think I just want to make a plea that we be really focused on actually what it is, because we've not got a lot of officer time for this is a massive subject. We need a laser-like focus on what it is do we actually want to achieve or deliver. What is it that we are not where we are not as strong as perhaps colleagues would want us to be, and shine the bright light on that. If just a suggestion. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And yeah, I agree with everything you've said, both cabinet members. But we are obviously doing a lot in the council, and we, corporate plan proposals for this year and the budget, follows through to do as much as we can. But I think part of the point which I picked up from what he said tonight and last night was, rather than people going to nature, people need nature where they are. Because he said you can go off like as a destination to a nature reserve or to a park. But you do actually, the most recent evidence, more or less his words, was that actually is a disbenefit for your health. Having to go somewhere to see nature doesn't actually improve your well-being. What improves your well-being is if nature is everywhere. And I think that's what he would, for instance, the idea of 1 square metre of green space, where if everybody's got that where they live, it might be a window box or whatever. That's the type of my impression of where he was coming from. And yes, we've got, and I agree, we've got lots of policies, but I just wonder if we can look at our policies and to see where, we can sort of, within what we're planning to do, perhaps put an emphasis on it. And the rural areas are probably just as vital, because it's literally outside everybody's front doorstep is what he's talking about in terms of nature connections. It doesn't matter if you're in the town, in the city, or in a village or a hamlet, if there's no nature immediately around where you're living, you're suffering in a way, your well-being suffers as a result. It would be better clearly if there were. And as I say, coming back to just what we've seen in Maidstone over the last 10 years is, and Councillor Harwood will know because this has come up at meetings before, is a hardening of our environment, loss of street trees, loss of front garden space, paving over of all front gardens. So there are lots of roads around, and I'm sure it's the same in the, in villages as much as in the town, where you see that your immediate environment just becomes concrete or just becomes bricks and mortar, and there is less nature. And I just think somehow, I don't care really how we do it, but I think we just need to try to fathom out how over time we can address it. It may be planning policies, it may be just venting some of what we're planning, like Councillor Wilkinson suggested living walls. We've discussed that in the council over the last few years, and we've obviously have had lamp posts, outside here in the high street. We started to move those ways, but there's just ways of thinking how you can bring it so everybody has nature where they are. You don't have to go away to see it. Councillor Jeffries.
Yeah, just briefly. Councillor Thompson mentioned the hook around health. There's another hook in there around in terms of the rights of nature one, where we're talking about looking and reviewing policies. So all of these suggestions are really helpful in terms of making sure we're focused on the right areas. The other bit just to mention, two bits to mention, we'll come back onto the Earl Street stuff. There's stuff in there. We'll come back on that later on the agenda. And Councillor Conyard, you talked about the qualitative side. We can certainly build that into the residence survey, although it's biannual. It would be a good one to put in there, I think.
Councillor Wilkinson and Councillor Clark.
Thank you. I just wanted to say I got a bit mixed up with the Earl Street Public Realm Improvement Scheme with the Shopfront Improvement Scheme, because it does say in the back about the greening in Earl Street anyway, but I was got a mix up. Sorry, it's been a long day.
Thank you, Councillor Clark.
I just wanted to make a point actually. We've got a lot of veg spaces around Maidstone, and I've been involved in a few planting of bulbs on veg spaces. It's slightly different to trees, where KCC are usually quite concerned about utilities, and they may sometimes say that certain areas can be planted and certain areas can't be planted. But there are opportunities. Obviously, if KCC were to come out with a statement to say that these are the veg spaces in Maidstone, which crocus and daffodils can be planted up, and there's no concern about trunking or utilities, then that's something we could work from. We could go out to communities and parishes and say, these are areas where if you can find people, we could do some planting. But I did a planting quite recently, and there was a lot of young children, a lot of people getting very dirty, and it was a lot of fun.
Thank you. Anybody else want to mention anything more on that? Councillor Hahn.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I think you raised a couple of areas, in passing, where that shining a bright light may be a really worthwhile exercise. One is around garden space and its transformation to parking areas, because we know in your ward we've got plenty of areas. There's no drop curbs. They're not official in any way, yet front gardens have been tarmacked. I mean, in Tunbridge Road, for example, where and it's occurring now. I quite often talk to enforcement about some of the more gratuitous, no drainage, on slopes type kind of hard standing on front gardens, and the policy is very opaque around what you can and cannot control, and very different from the case in continental Europe, where you have to pay more equivalent of council tax if you do it, because you've increased flood vulnerability of neighbours and you overload surface water drainage systems and so on. But in this country, it is not appropriately controlled, in my view. And that's the sort of thing where perhaps a report to look at best practice in relation to policy around conversion of garden space into parking areas, so that we do ensure there is appropriate drainage, that there is some green space left, may be worth doing. Your other point around street trees and their loss or removal for safety reasons and other things. Technology in terms of tree pits has moved on so quickly, so fast, that it would be a really interesting area to look at, because we have a role obviously with local development plans, and we work with our partners at Kent County Council and their soft estate team quite closely. So again, we could look at, you know, all these areas where we're always told no, it's sterilised to tree planting because of underground services. That may no longer be the case. Go to central London, where there's certainly a lot of underground services, but they have lots of street trees in you know, places like Smith Square, you know, right at the centre of government. So I think it might be worth, you know, our looking at those kind of areas. So it's just a suggestion that if we are going to have a focus, you know, that sort of thing, we can make a measurable distance and difference. And just very quickly, as an aside, on the green wall issue, I think the challenge with green walls, unless it's something growing up from the ground, is that they're very expensive to maintain, are very difficult to water and keep alive, particularly with current very erratic climate. And therefore, we need to really look at what is sustainable and where there's the most bang for our bucks. And frankly, plants growing in the ground, it's a lot more sustainable and cost effective. So, you know, we should try not to remove them in the first place, rather than have to go for the only place that's left on a roof or on a wall.
Thank you very much for that, Tony. I'm just thinking. You see my cogs going around. I think what was useful was both Councillor Jeffreys and Councillor Thompson's referring to the current actions we have on rights of nature, in brackets policies, and the one on delivering a healthier borough. Delivering a healthier borough through health in all policies. And I just wondered perhaps if we could sort of note that following our discussions, that both cabinet members said that they would work to see how nature connections can be included within those existing actions, which is, I think, what you both said. And also picking up what Councillor Harwood was just saying about garden space and front garden parking and street trees. I'm just thinking we've got all the work coming up on, I don't know what we call it now. I was going to say the local plan review, but it would actually have to be a review, wouldn't it? But the new work coming up on the local plan, whether that may be a way to look at those items, because if we can ultimately lead after a review and in those areas to new policies, well, the policies would need to go into our next version of the local plan. So perhaps those items could be picked up through that route. And I know we're use the word planning. I know we're about to start reviewing local planning and the way forward on it. So perhaps if everyone thinks those seem the sensible ways of doing it, it would encourage the cabinet to build in nature connections into the rights of nature and the healthier borough, and also looking at garden space and street trees when we're doing our updates of the local plan work. Because to me, those would be good, positive ways to take forward our discussion. Everyone think that seems sensible? Anybody think it doesn't? Okay, great. In which case, now open up the discussion to everything else in the report. Councillor Russell.
Thank you. A question, and then I'll ask for a reminder, if that's all right. So my question is page 22. I wondered what that meant, exploring differential charging in our car parks. That's my question. And then a reminder, because I should remember this, but out of all of the targets that we've got only less than half are targets, the rest are data only. Now, I know that doesn't just mean that we collect the data and then don't worry about it, but can you give me a refresher on what we do with the data, particularly if we're looking at things like, you know, number of homeless applications made and it says data only? Can you refresh my brain on, you know, if that kept going up, I'm sure we don't just go, that's lovely, that's gone up. It drives action. Does it drive action? Then we could come back with a target, or could you just walk me through that? So that's my two things. Thank you.
I shall come back on that, Paul. So in terms of differential charging in car parks, this is something that's done in other boroughs. There are a variety of ways of doing it. It is to encourage greener vehicles rather than big polluting ones. It can be done on weight, length, and CO2, etc. We know other councils do it. We want to explore whether it's feasible here. In terms of the data, you've got the dashboards themselves are online and available to everybody, members of the public as well. They are looked at, and as you say, Claudine, starting to head in the wrong direction. We have those conversations, but they're down to the individual portfolio holders and to have the conversations with officers.
Anybody else want to raise anything? No, I was just going to mention, and I sort of mentioned it last night, that I got the assurance from Stuart that in terms of as we work through these, bearing in mind you've really only got one more year, I was going to say, of freedom of when we can do effectively what we want to do before we get into restrictions with assuming the shadow unitary elections take place in April 2027. We're very constrained after that. But we need to make sure that all of these actions can be delivered, or pretty, if not fully, pretty well. So that any commitments have been made before we get to the end of this calendar year, I'd say, rather than the council year.
Just come back on that. We are expecting the Section 24 notice sometime later this year. We do not know exactly what it will say. We've got some ideas, but the key principle that we've seen in others is where we've agreed things that are going to happen after that Section 24 notice, then we can carry on. But we don't know what will be in it, and that could change. But from what we've seen, the more commitments we can make while we've got our hands untied, the better. We will try to do that.
Thank you. Right, okay, nobody else wants to raise anything at this point, and we turn to page 14 where we've got the recommendations. So we've got the two recommendations that the year two action plan be approved and the continuation of the current key performance indicators be agreed. Does it work? I didn't think I just noted, can't we? And can we also agree just to note the inclusion of nature connections in rights of nature and delivering a healthier, stronger borough through health in all policies, and picking up on the points the two cabinet members mentioned. And probably, I suppose, we just need to note or request that picking up Councillor Harwood's points around green garden space, car parking and street trees be considered as part of the local plan. I don't know what just local plan, isn't it? You can't use refresh or review because we've done refreshes and reviews of the local plan. So, but yeah, if everyone's happy with that, then yeah, is that all agreed? Great. Okay, thank you. That takes us then on to item 11, which is the medium-term financial strategy and budget proposals, starting off on page 31. And I look to, I think, Stuart, you're going to introduce this. Okay.
Well, I'm not going to say very much. I'm going to hand rapidly over to Adrian. You've got three aspects here. You've got the draft MTFS, the revenue budget proposals, which I hope you'll find exciting, and the draft capital programme. But Adrian's going to give the detail.
Good evening, everyone. So, yeah, as we said, it's the three key elements that we are trying to share with you tonight to get your hopefully support for Cabinet. It also includes the residents' budget survey, so it gives you an idea of what they're thinking in terms of whether they want more or less of certain items and so forth. The report is trying to explain that it's good practice also to continue planning over 5 years. I know we've got LGR coming forward, potentially Maidstone might not be here, but there is still a pressure on us financially and sort of with a Section 151 role to make sure we continue to plan so that we can afford to justify the organisation going forward. The MTFS itself aligns with the corporate strategy. We obviously just had a conversation on that. So the MTFS itself describes how the council will try and balance the requirements of operating with a constrained budget environment. But this includes the impact of the new fair funding regime, whilst also seeking to deliver against the key priorities in the corporate plan strategy. Sorry, I used the wrong word. The revenue budget proposals, pages 36, 37, give you a bit more detail in terms of text and a bit of detail in Appendix B. They obviously are trying to set where we are trying to improve or make adjustments. Particularly, you'll notice some are called Year 2 Action Plan, which covers the particular newer items where we're trying to deliver against the particular Year 2 Action Plan. Overall, across all the packs, the budget proposals allow us to give a balanced budget, which is good news, assuming the assumptions in the MTFS come true. But obviously, that's a bit of a task in terms of just knowing what's going to happen in the future. Capital programme is on page 41. Apologise, I know the chair will update you a bit more, but some text is missing on some of the description of the capital items, particularly around the leisure area. So we'll go through that in a moment. But hopefully that covers all the key ones that I think people were expecting. Budget survey is in Appendix D and E. That gives you the results of what people are keen to see, not necessarily for this pack, but they're obviously keen on environmental services, particularly waste, and obviously parks and open spaces, which we've had a bit of a conversation on. So we're obviously asking you to support recommendations for Cabinet for the MTFS, the budget proposals and the capital strategy principles and the capital programme. Obviously, I'll hand over to Chair, who wants to verbally update you on a bit more on the bit of text that's missing, and then obviously happy to answer questions.
Thank you for that, Adrian. Yeah, if I can just draw people's attention to page 41, because I was at the Policy Advisory Committee last night, and I spotted, I only realised it wasn't in these papers earlier today. There are actually 4 items of capital which are under the banner of Healthier, Stronger Communities Capital, which I think people find good news. So I'll just go, obviously we need to be aware of them. So the first one was leisure provision, which is £1.136 million. And the wording is just, as part of the Maidstone Leisure Centre contractual extension, the council committed to an investment programme to ensure that the facility remains fit for purpose and its income generating potential is maximised. The second one, which is very close to my heart, and I'm sure to Claudine's, is a new leisure centre, which is £17,950,000, and the text being funding to support the building of a new leisure centre. This will require development of options and a specification of the council's requirements. The costs, including the cost of any new building, will extend beyond the current 5-year planning period. The third one is Kent Medical Campus Innovation Centre, £250,000, and that's just funding to support the improvement of the innovation centre to maximise rental returns. And the last one under this heading was Museum Development Plan, £350,000, which is funding for the refurbishment of Maidstone museums and heritage initiatives. The initial focus will be on the Carriage Museum and the withdrawing room refurbishment, allowing community groups to use this space. External funding will also be sought for the museum development plan, as proposed expenditure in its entirety may not meet the criteria for capital investment. So those items are directly under this committee. They were missed out on the papers, but I spotted them because they were on last night when we had the corporate thing, which listed everything. And they're obviously included in all the figures in the appendix. It's just the text got missed out from our papers. That's why I've just read through. That's just word for word what's in the report, which went up last night. I just thought it's really important for people to understand those 4 things because they are quite important for us. Yeah, sorry.
Could we have that emailed round to us?
Yeah,
so we can
I'll
keep
tell
it
you-
all together.
Yeah, we can sort that out, Cassie, getting those couple of paragraphs emailed around to everybody. Yeah, great. Thanks, Adrian. Right, okay, so with that, I'll open it up to debate. Yeah, Councillor Russell.
Yeah, a couple of points from me. Page 37, the integrated transport strategy, £50,000 saving, reverse sort of a 1-year growth item to fund the research in 25-26. So I'm assuming we didn't do it this year. We're not planning to do it in 26. That's why it's been reversed. So I'm not sure. I mean, it's all about choices, isn't it? That's probably not one that I'd make, but I'd appreciate a bit more understanding on that. Page 41, the favourite, the flood barrier scheme, £206,000. I mean, I've not been here anywhere near as long as some people, but in my 5 years, that has been sitting there forever, not been spent. If we're talking in very short term, I really doubt that we're going to get that spent. May well prove me wrong, but that could be money that could go elsewhere. It's just sat there so long. I think my overall issue is the discussions that sit behind this. So when I'm thinking about a big problem, any massive problem, break it down into small bits. So, and see if I can do the different, little problems and then solve the big problem. Maybe that's just me. But if I'm thinking how as I go forward, I would like to cut people's council tax because ultimately we take council tax, we make decisions with people's money about how we think they would like it spent. There's some bits that are not discretionary. I'm very aware of that. But I ultimately think that people also have ideas of how they would like to spend their money and that they deserve a bit more in their pocket. That's my philosophy. So if I was tackling that big problem, I would do it in really small bits. So I really want to understand the conversations that went on when you were formulating this. Was there ever any basis where you started saying, is there something we could chop off instead of it being a 3% council tax rise? Could it even be a 2.99% council tax rise? Could I start us on that trend? Because there's some money that's come back, obviously, from the extended producer responsibility. That's a windfall. There are some things, was there a thought process? Could we give that back to the residents? Or was the only thought process how we're going to spend that money? I think I'd probably like to hear an answer of that. And then my other thing would be, if I was running a business, I'm very aware a council is not a business, but when you look at things like other income, and that's growing really in a small way, was there a discussion had, how can we push that income? Is there something we could do that's going to generate us even more money? Because then we could start on the road of the big problem. That's my only comments on it, really. But again, it's all about choices, and some of these would personally not be my choice. So.
Anybody else? Any points before I come to Councillor Jeffreys? No. Stuart, do you want to respond to that?
Yeah, sure. In terms of the 50,000 reversal on the ITS, that was a single year item. Therefore, we've reversed it, and therefore it's showing as a saving for this year. No, we didn't do the integrated transport strategy in the way we'd hoped to. We got LGR dumped on us. No, it wasn't. It was confusing my ears, aren't I? Sorry. We decided not to do it, and we partly because of the timescales, and partly because we wanted to build it into the town centre work that we're doing, and we've nearly finished that, but we haven't spent the money and we haven't done it in the way we wanted to. The flood barrier, oh gosh, the flood barrier. So we've had we've escalated the discussion quite heavily. Kent County Council tell us there is not a flood risk at the bottom of the high street, would you believe? And they're dragging their heels. We've had some very robust conversations with them certainly over the last few months on this. They don't feel that the fluvial flood risk, they reckon, sits with EA. So I've now got an email this morning from the regional director of the EA wanting to meet us to discuss this problem. So it's progressing, but we're getting it's like snail's pace, and it's painful. It is, yes, you're right. It should be there as part of the gyratory scheme, and we know there's a risk because we've got the photos from 2013. Council tax rise, could we, yes, there was a brief discussion on whether or not we should not spend money on stuff, but the priorities are very much there, and we are keen to meet some of these real urgent problems, and they continue to come and hit us. But what we have done is for I think it's about the 12% of the poorest properties, we are introducing a reduction in their council tax. So it's certainly 4,600 or something, is it? Of them will pay no council tax on, and they're the poorest properties. So we are protecting the poorest people, people on the lowest incomes primarily, whilst being able to deliver things that people really need. In terms of income maximisation, absolutely. We've not this year. Last year we certainly put some investment into commercial property and to bring us additional income. The opportunities haven't arisen this year, but we continue to look out for those, and certainly that I think there is a line in the capital budget to allow us to do that. So yes, we continue to look out for those.
Okay, actually, on that last point, if we look on page 68 or page 22 of the medium-term strategy, which is table 8 in paragraph 7.1, it's you can see the other income line, and it's just shown as flat through the whole 5-year period, which I think is what counts. Is that not the same line you were talking about?
It's the same line, but you need to go back to page 66, which breaks it down. So it ultimately ends up flat, but you can see like the fees and charges go up, okay. The rental income goes up.
One of the things I was going to say on actually on property rental income is possibly a typical line is that we've had lots of reports to, I think it's either this committee or to the sort of the Climate Change and Corporate Services Policy Advisory Committee about properties such as Lock Meadow and even Maidstone House and a number of other properties we own, some of which are the commercial side of it, and where we've been doing work in the sort of current year or early next year to get more tenants. I think Lock Meadow sure is one where there's been lots of discussion about we're going to get new tenants moving in. And I'm just wondering whether it's fully reflected, for instance, in that property rental income, which seems incredibly slow growth. Whereas if we're going to, I mean, if you think of Lock Meadow now, how empty it is, I would hope over the next couple of years, a lot of those empty units are taken up. And therefore, the property rental would be increasing at a faster rate. I think and other commercial property we have. Because when I look at that table 8, sorry, on page 68, and the in paragraph 7.3, the year after next, we're looking at having to make budget cuts of £1.3 million. Whereas we can maximise our income through commercial property and other areas. then we could obviously reduce this potential £1.3 million of budget cuts the year after next. Because one of the things, and I think I said last night, is that I quite like most of the growth items I see here. They tie in with the sort of year 2 of the corporate plans. There's a logic to them. But my concern is that then if the year after we've got to find £1.3 million, and I know from discounts and other accounts, the danger is some of those things you're just in the process of kicking off end up being some of the first things you end up cutting when money gets tight. Whereas if we can maximise our income coming in, we can reduce that £1.7 million, if not in total, but considerably, so that our final year of operations, we have a relatively smooth budget, a bit like this one. Stuart.
Yeah, if I can come back on, and then I'll pass over to Adrian on the commercial income stuff. Just in terms of the bumpy trajectory on the bottom line, there is a reserve which covers that off, which was the future funding reserve. Thank you. So that is all planned for in terms of making sure we smooth that. Part of that is due to a lag between borrowing money to build social homes and getting the income, because it takes, by the time we borrowed it, we kind of got a year or two before we can put people in there. So there's a lag there, which that will be covered off and smoothed through reserves. I mean, it's part of the cost of building, and probably needs to be built in expressed in a slightly different way. Just the other key point I wanted to come back on was around council tax increases, the 3%. If we don't do that in any one year, we get that impact for the future. So if let's say we reduce the spending by £1 million this year, or income by £1 million this year, through which I think is about 3%, then we lose that, not just 1 million for this year, but every year going forward. So we never are able to catch it up. So it is really quite important that if we did do that, we were very cognizant of the future impacts of that. Adrian's going to say something on the commercial income.
So yeah, just to say, as you say, on page, I can't remember the pages because they got 66, the increase is broadly in line with inflation. So that's how we were planning it. That we know in the capital programme we've got money to potentially buy more commercial properties. We've not built that in at the moment because we are nervous that we have to wait for that just commercial opportunity to be there. So if that comes forward, business case comes forward, then we'll feed that into the budget going forward. So hopefully see the benefits of that. Again, it just depends on what's the market and what's the right thing to do. In terms of the commercial bit, and certainly Lockmeadow, agree it's a good way to generate income, but there's also risks we've seen with some of the vacancies that it causes the budget pressure. So we do have to balance it, because you don't want to go too far like certain other councils that have gone far too far, and that causes you a problem financially. So it's that right balance, I think, that we're trying to manage as well.
Thank you. Anyone else at this stage? No. If not, let's go back to the page. Got our recommendation. Page 32. Just for the record, I'll just read out what they are. So we agree. One, that the Cabinet be recommended to approve the draft medium-term financial strategy for 2026-27 to 2030-31 set out in Appendix A. B, that the revenue budget proposals set out in Appendix B. C, that the capital strategy principles set out in the paragraph 4.6. 2.16. Sorry? 2.16. It was changed. Oh, sorry, that's 2.16, not 4.6, sorry. And D, that the capital programme proposals set out in Appendix C. And secondly, that the budget survey results in appendices D and D be noted. Okay, so I'm happy to move that. Is that seconded? Yeah. Okay, so everybody happy with that? Or does anyone want to vote? Okay, so can we see tongue tied? Can I see those in favour of the recommendations, please? Okay, thank you. Can I see those against? Thank you. That's duly passed. Do you want your names noted at all? If you could note the names of Councillor Spooner, Councillor Russell and Councillor Povey voted against. Okay, so that's that item, which brings us on to the events programme. So events programme 2026-27, starting on page 128, going through to page 137. Right, okay. I think this is a slightly hybrid item because we're responsible for arts and culture at this committee, which is obviously the bulk of what this is. But then it slightly crosses over into Councillor Nagy's area because it's talking about things like the River Festival and so on. So what I've agreed is that I'd ask Councillor Thompson to sort of introduce his side of it first, and then Councillor Nagy to introduce his side of it, so that we've got the round picture. So, Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We make no apology for repeating what we said at the opening full council meeting of this council, which is that the only use for cigarette papers these days is to demonstrate that you can't put one between Councillor Nagy's portfolio and mine. They are a seamless whole, on which point I have to apologise to you. On page 7 in the forward plan, it mentions Healthy Stronger Communities as portfolio holder and doesn't mention Councillor Nagy for community cohesion, and it should do because this is cross-cutting. You will also have appreciated on pages 36 and 37 on the budget growth items that we looked at earlier that our town centre strategy, culture, arts, leisure, economic development, the touring, museum, exhibitions, tourism items and so forth shows that we are forging ahead with coming up with a holistic plan. On pages 133 and 134 of this item, you can see we've presented 3 hugely creative options for your collective consideration. I'm not sure what it is that we deserve these days, Mr. Chairman. We certainly don't deserve the brilliant officers that have produced all of this suite of excellent ideas. I'm hugely excited to be a cabinet member for this portfolio in the 80th anniversary year of Maidstone's Carriage Museum. I'm looking forward to lots of opportunities to remind you over and again about that, as well as the 25th anniversary of Maidstone River Park, 2 items along with the sensory garden, which we are championing in option 2. More widely, you'll see that we're weaving in as many of the cross-cutting means as we possibly can. So local business, river stakeholders are front and centre in option 2. Schools engagement is in option 3, where we're reaching for means for sustaining these sorts of activities, arts, culture, events, the whole seamless piece through the remainder of MBC's term of leadership in Maidstone and beyond. And that really brings me to the important points in option 1. Councillor Russell was quite right to ask the question about whether or not we're making intelligent and far-seeing decisions about how taxes are spent. I believe it was a past Chancellor in 2012 who said we're all still in this together. Our conviction is that spending our collective taxes on doing things which benefit everybody is a really good way of spending a modest amount of people's money. So a Maidstone festival involving town centre businesses and local community groups and organisations doing their own thing. I'm grateful to Councillor Clark earlier for blowing the trumpet for Councillor Conyard's Big Day Out, which of course is not an MBC event. It demonstrates the wider networking of partnerships that we are reaching for. That's in the second paragraph of option 1. Those are not MBC initiatives that we're looking for. We're looking to promote groups bringing forward their own events that, again, hit all of our cross-cutting commitments to theatre, visual arts, exhibitions, wellness, and so forth, harking back to Mr. Darlington's comments earlier, and indeed economic development. I'm looking forward with great relish to the polite squabble that's going to happen as to which of these marvellous options it is that you're going to recommend to us. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Councillor Nargi, if you'd like to.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm here tonight to really promote option 2, because a lot of you won't remember the Millennium Park, as it was then. It was the biggest project in Kent, and it was really a massive event at the time, and a bit of an achievement for Maidstone to have that sort of project in Kent over all the other ones that applied. And I feel doing this in this year would advertise it, that there is a park there, especially for people moving into Maidstone, because it's one of those places you don't go to, you don't walk past it every day, you have to go to it. And I think having this anniversary and having this event marked as the 25th anniversary would remind people it's there. And when we have an event that people go to, hopefully, as always with outside events, it's a dry day, makes things a lot better. But I just think it's important to mark this event, and we've done it in a way that there's money left over. Some of the funding goes into ring fencing for the Maidstone Festival next year. So it's already got money put aside, so you can start organising that for next year, which is a bit of a rare thing too. So my view is that my preferred option would be the Millennium Park event for this year. And I think it would actually put it back on the map for more people to go to and explore if they didn't already know it was there. But this is an opportunity to promote it, which we generally don't do in things like Moat Park and all the other parks. But this Millennium Park, or Watman Park now as it's called, it would just be a one-off event for this year to mark it, and would be a great opportunity to promote it. And maybe other people might want to put events on in that park if they realise it can be booked. And I think this is the idea of it, to promote it, make sure people know it can be used, and if they want to use it, it's there to be used. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, can I just check? Is Anne-Marie on the line?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Right. Okay. It's just that the cameras aren't working. I didn't know if perhaps at this stage if there's anything you'd like. I didn't know if at this stage if there's anything you'd like to add to Anne-Marie.
Just to say that it's not just one event that we're proposing for the 25th anniversary. It would be a whole series of them, working with partners and businesses, other river stakeholders, to deliver a whole series of events to mark the 25th anniversary. But we would work to kind of brand them under a single Silver Jubilee umbrella with appropriate marketing and promotion. So, yeah.
Thank you very much for that. Before I invite Councillor Clark and then Councillor Greenham to speak, I'd just like to say a couple of words on this. I mean, I've got Councillor Russell as well. When I was looking at this with the officers on, Councillor Spoon as well. Joe, okay. Everybody, okay, well, we'll go around the table, but I'll take the chair's prerogative to kick off. So when I was having my briefing on Monday with the officers, looking at these options, my immediate one I thought was option 1. I thought it was then a really good idea, a month-long celebration, okay, it's year after next. One thing I'd ask us to consider in terms of any festival is when we're looking at the various communities we've listed, we've left out LGBT+. So in terms of looking at the diverse communities, that's one of our larger diverse communities is missing from that list, which we need to bear in mind. But option 2, I think potentially, if we can get a lot of sponsorship, could be a better one, because then we'll be able to do some events during July of this year, as well as starting to plan for a month-long festival sort of next year. So the money would go for 2 years. But I think we need to be cognizant that we would need to find probably £20,000 of sponsorship to help fund both of those events properly. And so as long as the officers and the cabinet members commit themselves to doing the maximum they can do to get sponsorship in, then I'm happy to support the preference for option 2. I just don't want to find that we get to the end of this year and then we're looking at a report and we suddenly say, well, actually, we can't do the festival because we've got no sponsorship and £5,000 to pay for like one band concert somewhere rather than the events we're looking at. And just to prove my support for it, I was speaking to the Medway Valley Community Rail Partnership today, and they may be interested in a couple of events linked to the Millennium Park Festival. So I may already be able to bring in some additional activities there. So probably, since everybody's indicated, we work our way around the table. So Councillor Povey, I don't know if you want to raise an mention.
Yeah, I'm kind of split.
Well, I'm going to go around the table because everybody sort of said they wanted to speak. It's just easier, yeah.
Yeah, I'm kind of split between option 1 and option 2. I think personally, I think option 1 is kind of a bit of a big bang and bells and whistles. Option 2 sort of spreads things a little bit, and I don't know how the timing works, but one thing I'm conscious of is the World Cup's on this year between sort of the middle of June and middle of July, and that may, I don't know how much that affects attendance at events like that. So I'll listen to the debate, but I'm kind of hovering between 1 and 2.
Councillor Wilkinson.
I do think that the Millennium Park is underutilised, and it is an amazing space. I want to champion bringing back proms in the park because that is an amazing event. I mean, I know that maybe that was sponsored before by S106 monies before, but even if it was like a low ticket event just to cover the cost of it or something like that, because it is, when you have that kind of event in Millennium Park, it is amazing. It's a great space for events.
I think that's a useful comment. Dennis, no? Okay, so Claudine.
Yeah, thank you. It was just regarding, well, first of all, if your portfolios are exactly the same, well, we may as well just have one of you. Joking aside, that would be a saving. When we're talking about the costing, I'm not sure that the costing's enough. And the reason I say that is because, picking up on exactly what Councillor Wilkinson just said, there was a developer funding for previous proms in the park. When that got pulled, it was a minimum by the developer who had finished developing and moved on. The minimum to put that event on was 20,000. That was 2023. So I'm thinking that the costs in either option 1 or 2 might not be quite up high enough, particularly if you are talking in option 2. It said you want a bandstand style concert in Watman Park. Sounds a bit similar to proms in the park. And then you've got £15,000. Unless you're going out for big sponsorship, and I don't know who that'd be from, I'm worried about the costs associated with that, either of those 2.
Thank you for that point. Councillor Conyon.
Thank you, Chair. In terms of the different options, they sound great. Number 1 sounds absolutely fantastic, but I am mindful that if you're running that through the month of June, there are lots of events, not only the one that was mentioned earlier that I look after, but also Maidstone Pride, and there's a potential for conflicting and tripping up other events and contributing to lesser success for them.
Good point. Councillor Clark.
Yeah, I do think that the River Park is underutilised. I remember when it was launched, I took my mum along there, and she was absolutely amazed how beautiful it was. My mum grew up in Ringleton. My grandfather had a pig farm in Ringleton, believe it or not. And I think it's a great idea. I'm not sort of saying that we shouldn't have an amazing Maidstone festival, but let's get it right. Let's take a little bit of time. We've got something we can celebrate for 25 years, and let's do that following that. So I'm happy to propose the papers.
Yeah, Councillor Crennan,
Propose the recommendation of 3.2 on the papers.
option 2. Yeah, okay. Well, I'll second that, Councillor Crennan. Sorry.
I would absolutely love to support option 2. Being a neighbour of Watman Park, it was a lifesaver during COVID. Lots of families were out walking, and it really became a place that the community came together. I think it's brilliant. We're going to be celebrating 25 years of the park. So often we're asked about having events again at Watman Park after Proms in the Park was cancelled. I think this would be a great opportunity. The only thing I wanted to say, obviously, option 1 would mentioned about different communities coming together and being represented. Well, one of the things is Watman Park, it's a park that's open for everybody, and we get everybody there from different communities. Polish, Bulgarian, Romanian families are often there at the weekends. So I think this is a great way of pulling everybody together, and also connects to what Mr. Darlington said earlier, you know, connectedness to nature. This would be a great way to ensure that families understand where the park is and what we can offer in Maidstone.
Thank you, Councillor Keeley.
Thank you. I've got a question about, it applies more to some of the options than others, but how would what's in place to ensure that the things that are planned for 2027 go ahead? Because it's okay to say we'll spend that or we'll leave that to spend then. What is in place to make sure that happens? I'm sure Councillor Margie's not going to trot off with 15,000k, and but what is in place for that to continue on those options where there is something for 27, 28 going onwards and what have you? It's just a query as to what is in place. Thank you.
I mean, ultimately, once we've set the plan in place, it'll be down to the cabinet members to make sure that that is delivered both this year and the following year. But one assumes that it will be built into objectives for directors and for the staff below it. So there will be an audit trail that pushes it through into future years. Did I answer that? Are you talking about LGR? Or LGR into, or just the fact that it will be in the future. So in terms of LGR, yeah, I mean, 2028 comes, who knows? It depends who's running the council.
That was my queries. Not that I think any of our cabinet, anybody, or any of our officers are going to do anything, devious with it. It's what happens if we're planning for the future when we are no longer here. What is in situ? Because obviously, if you've got, for example, a planning document that is done, that's legal, blah blah blah. But if we say 15k for this and blah blah blah, and that doesn't happen, yeah, that was my query. Okay, thank you.
Actually, Claire, we would still be here in 27, and as long as we've committed the money in our budget, and it's not, I mean, the worst a Section 24 notice would do, based on elsewhere, is limit you to £100,000 lifelong cost. Anything over that you'd have to do potentially with a unitary, but this festival anyway would be well under that figure. So I think it will be within our ability to budget for. But I was going to ask Anne-Marie if you could perhaps come in on the point Councillor Russell mentioned, obviously, about the Prom in the Park and what happened in 23 when it was a developer, wasn't it? I think they withdrew their funding, and the type of costs we looked at, and also perhaps any thoughts you might have at this stage in terms of sponsorship and the ability to perhaps attract sponsorship income, because I think that's really important in terms of helping set the scene for us.
Yeah, certainly. Proms in the Park in 2023, the developer pulled out on us, I think, 6 weeks before the event was due to go ahead. Fortunately, I'd already secured an extra £10,000 from Arts Council England, which we were able to reallocate to ensure the event could still go ahead. But the overall budget for that was £30,000. So, excuse me, we have tried ticketing the proms before. I can't remember exactly what year it was. It was a while ago. It's very difficult to do in Watman Park because it has free access. So managing ingress and egress is very difficult. I mean, it's not impossible, but it's very tricky. In terms of sponsorship, I am certainly happy to explore any and all options that we can think of. I can talk to colleagues who have more experience in it. There are a few businesses along the riverside that we know would be interested in getting involved. But if I could just say that the plan to ring fence £5,000 for the festival in 2027 that would also be bolstered in 2027 with a further £15,000 from next year's budget to give us £20,000 in total to deliver the Maidstone Festival for 2027. The purpose for ring fencing £5,000 from this year's budget is just to allow us to start work on it and to get some printing and promotional materials developed ahead of the festival taking place. June is put forward as a suggestion for the month that it happens, but that can be moved. We could maybe do it in May or July. So there are options for that. And again, we would certainly be looking to work with local businesses for sponsorship. And that does give us a lot more opportunities for that as well, because if we're producing a printed document, a leaflet to promote all of the events, we'll have advertising space and sponsorship opportunities within that document as well.
No, thank you very much for that. One idea while you were just talking, Anne-Marie, which came to my mind was the community section of the National Lottery Fund. Now, I don't think we could apply for it, but they have the Awards for All programme, which has been increased, I think, to £20,000 as one-off grants now. And I'm just wondering whether if we could find some partners in the arts sector who preferably are registered charities, that we've got enough time for a programme in 2027 to potentially put a bid with them in to Awards for All to identify £20,000 of money from the community lottery. And I can't remember the name of it. It's the Maidstone Arts. I'm looking for you.
Maidstone Area Arts Partnership no longer exists, I'm afraid. It was,
okay.
Yeah.
You killed them off in the end, did you?
Not me personally.
We need to look for a partner which could, as I said, if they're a registered charity, apply for the money, which could help us working with the community, actually boost up our funding to deliver a really good sort of festival. So that's one area. But yeah, and remembering the river park stretches all the way from Barming up pretty well up to Alresford. So if we're looking at doing some work along it, we should be looking at the whole length of it, not just concentrating completely on Watman Park and the amphitheatre, but because if we stretch it out, it comes, starting at Barming, you're starting out in the countryside, you come through Fan, work your way through High Street and Bridge, and then go out through Ringleston and out, out into the countryside on the other side. So if we look at it in that way, potentially gives us, another aspect to it, which is linking town and country and linked with all our ecology and biodiversity work as well. Councillor Russell.
I mean, I was just thinking, from everything everyone said, you can see the money's clearly going to be tight, and also, I mean, Anne-Marie, bless her, the running around that she had to do on the 2023 was absolutely ridiculous. It's good that we put anything on. So I think whilst you can hope that you will get additional funding, you shouldn't put that into your base budget because you may not get it. I know everyone thinks I just go on about figures all the time, but this is I do. So I think where you've got option 2, I would trying to save you here. I would personally put the 5,000 in with that. So you've got the full £20,000 for the 2026 event, and you're just going to have to go again for 2027 within the fullness of the budget and see if you've got some money for that year to put a different thing on. I just think you've left your figures too tight here for the kind of things that you're talking about. But I mean, that's my proposal. I don't know if I've got a seconder. Up to you guys.
That's an amendment to the proposal. Yeah, so your amendment is that we look at option 2, but allocate the whole £20,000 to the 26th event, and that we seek additional funding for the 27 festival. Okay, everyone clear on that? Right. Anyone any comments on that at all? Anyone from is it Dennis? Are you seconding it, Dennis? Yeah. Okay. Right. Okay. So if no one else wants to speak on that, let's just vote quickly on that amendment that we need to allocate £20,000. Sorry, Brian.
I'm going to vote against it, unfortunately, because I just think that we're sort of making up a few thousand here, a few thousand there on the fly, and I prefer to go with the main recommendation. So I'm sorry, Anne-Marie, I know that I might put a challenge for you to find the money, but I'm going to go with the original.
Thanks. Yeah. So,
I'm very happy to withdraw my proposal.
well, I was going to support it. Fair enough. I think the point's noted that we are concerned on the tightness of the money and that we need to do everything we can do. Now, I know obviously time is short for trying to put an event on later this year, but to get additional external income to help supplement it. I just want, off the top of my head, things like Maidstone Museum Foundation. They're a heritage organisation, they're a charity, they could potentially apply for a bid if we're looking at celebrating a historic anniversary, for instance. I'm sure there's lots of organisations how we could then start to pull in awards for all funding, because you could do it for both years. And they're relatively easy grants to get, because we've got them where I work, and you're surprised how easy they are to get. Right, so the proposal then is that we go for option 2. If we turn back to the recommendations, so the full recommendations are that the proposed events programme for 26-27 as outlined in paragraph 2.3 of the report be noted that the development and delivery of the programme of events to celebrate the 25th anniversary of the River Park in 2026 be approved, and the development and delivery of a Maidstone Festival to take place initially in 2027 and then annually after that, ring fencing provision of 25,000 from the 26-27 budget to allow preparatory work to start in 26 be approved. So are we all happy with agreeing those proposals?
Agreed.
Thank you. Something else I was going to say. No, I can't say that. Okay, that's great. Thank you very much, Anne-Marie, for listening in for the evening. And if you want, you're obviously free to go. And since we can't see you, I'm sure you will go. So that brings us on to item 13, which is the Tunbridge and Malling Draft Local Plan 2024 to 2042, Regulation 18 consultation, pages 138 to 163 of our papers. And I'm looking to Councillor Harwood to initially present, and then for Tom Gilbert to add.
Thank you, Chairman and members. This is an early stage Regulation 18 consultation exercise for a local plan in Tunbridge and Malling. I mean, as we're aware, Tunbridge and Malling hasn't had an up-to-date local plan for some time. They're now moving towards adoption of a document. The consultation period actually ended on the 2nd of January, which is quite a difficult date. So we didn't get you all in here on New Year's Day. But what we have had is confirmation from Tunbridge and Malling that we've already sent a response to hit the deadline of 2nd of Jan. But if anything new is brought up at this committee, T&M are receptive to taking it, even though it's beyond the closure of their consultation period. In terms of the response that we've already submitted, I suppose highlights were quite a strong objection to the proposals for residential development at Bunyards Farm. I mean, colleagues will remember there was quite a long and bitter, in the end, campaign to achieve village green status on that land as the last remaining strategic gap, essentially between Maidstone and T&M developments. But the inquiry that took place decided against village green status. However, I think there is an issue there about strategic gap, and we've also raised secondary concerns about the density of some of the developments on our border. And I think it's quite illuminating when you take the train to London from Maidstone East and you go past Bridge Nursery and Maidstone Borough on the east side of the London Road, and it's got beautiful long open space running along the edge of it. And then you come up to the ones in T&M and it's development right up to the railway line, and it's a much denser development. So we've raised some concerns about density in those boundary areas. However, I think probably the biggest concern we raised related to the land around the waste to energy plant. That colleagues will remember that when the incinerator, as it was called then, was a planning application, there was real local resident concern, and a major concession that was achieved was for a very significant landscaped area for a nature reserve which runs up to the Cold Harbour roundabout, where lots of trees have been planted which are now starting to reach maturity, and there are ponds in there, and it's actually a very kind of pleasant area and has some quite significant biodiversity value. But there is a site allocation within the Regulation 18 document from T&M under E4, which proposes that entire area to become an extension to the business park down by the 2020 site. So we have asked that the area which is currently the nature reserve is taken out from policy E4 so that we retain it. I mean, it may be, we don't know what the thinking is and whether it would be maintained, but for clarity, it should not all be shaded red as economic development because it was there for a reason. Another thing which was in common with our comments recently on the Medway Council draft local plan relates to biodiversity net gain, where again, Tunbridge and Morling are proposing 10% BNG, which is just the standard statutory area, when the Kent Nature Partnership, which the Kent districts are a part of, and indeed Medway are a part of, they agreed and recommended that Kent local authorities should go for 20% because of the particular pressure on our county and our natural heritage from development. And I just find it a little bit strange that local authorities in one meeting agree to something in their documents are not following through on that. So again, we raised that dichotomy. I think that is it in terms of kind of highlights within our response. But if there is anything new, anything at all that we need to send along, please raise it. I know that we have some experts on T&M planning in the room, so we'll see what happens. Thank you.
Tom, do you want to add anything?
The only thing I would add is there will be a subsequent consultation of Regulation 19 in the summer this year, and then a submission will be by December this year to the government. So they're probably the only additions.
Well, Councillor Clark. When I saw this item on the agenda, I contacted all the ward members in West Maidstone, so the other side of the river here, because obviously their wards immediately above Tunbridge and Morling. I also contacted the councillors for Coxheath and Farley, just to make everybody aware that this item was here tonight. And Councillor Stanley Forecast came back to me, and I said to him, I'll just read out what he said. So Stan said he's pleased to see Maidstone Borough Council are opposing Bunyards and the Brayborn applications. And I just like, as I say, there's a member for Fountain Oakwood who is intimately knowledgeable of all these issues on our boundary, to say that I'm really pleased to see us objecting to those proposals along Hermitage Lane. Hermitage Lane is becoming an increasing nightmare. We have our main, well, the only hospital for Maidstone, which is almost inaccessible for large parts of the day because of the current volume of traffic on Hermitage Lane. And I notice there seems to be nothing in what Tunbridge and Malling are saying, bearing in mind most of Hermitage Lane actually comes under Tunbridge and Malling, the northern parts of that road, to alleviate either the existing issues associated with it or to address the issues associated with this additional housing they're proposing there. And I think we should make it very, very clear as a council that we cannot support any further development along Hermitage Lane without mitigation, significant mitigation measures in terms of how Hermitage Lane can function as a major distributor road, how we can maintain ease of access for emergency services and residents and visitors to Maidstone Hospital, because if we allow these additional developments to go on, Maidstone Hospital won't function, and when people are ill, they will be stuck. And as I saw today with the weather, ambulances can't get up and down Tunbridge Road, and they can't get up and down Hermitage Lane to access our only hospital with the facilities. So I think it's really important that we really emphasise that. And I think the other thing, it's not just the road access in terms of all this development, Tunbridge and Malling applying on to effectively the outskirts of Maidstone. There's no additional retail facilities coming in, virtually no education, seems to be no extra proposals for pupils in schools and GP. And that is pushing the issues for those residents into West Maidstone, where already the Blackthorn medical practice, the college medical practice and the Vine medical practice cannot cope with their current population and demands, let alone these additional thousands of houses and people coming from there. Hermitage Park was supposed to have a primary school and land was allocated for it. Most of that development has now been built and there's no education provision being put over there. So again, where do the children go? Primary age children go. They try to get into places like St Michael's School, into Barming School, into Westborough School, into the Jubilee School. Those schools were designed to take people who live in West Maidstone. They're already oversubscribed. And we're having this problem of these estates outside our boundary pushing more and more in. And I really think we've got to be, and I know we've kicked back here, but I would just urge that we really emphasise this. It's just not acceptable when there is no facilities being provided for this level of development to go on. Bunyards, I was slightly involved in the Village Green application over that, would have been the last piece of green space. Sorry, I'm getting a bit emotional on this, aren't I? Would have been the last piece of green space between us and the start of Aylesford. We need some differentiation between the two, and we're just losing it. And Tunbridge and Malling, it's convenient for them to bung all their development up against Maidstone, not provide any infrastructure, because they just think Maidstone will sort it out, which seems to me to be one of the underlying thrusts of this Tunbridge and Malling local plan. So, yeah, sorry, I'm on my high horse now. I'll take Councillor Clark and then Councillor Spooner.
Thank you, Chairman. I think the elephant in the room is probably more KCC orientated than Tunbridge and Malling. But what we clearly are seeing is intense development that's really going to have an impact on our borough. And there's several people in this room. I know yourself, Councillor Russell. For years now, we've looked at what mitigation we've got for our local plan on the transport side, and we're witnessing an enormous amount of money of the pot that was secured for Maidstone that is essentially going. It went towards the Cole Harbour roundabout, which is going to mitigate this housing development. It went towards Hermitage Lane in Tunbridge and Malling, which is going to mitigate it. But it came out of our pot, and I find it very galling that we've got a lot of impact going on the fringes of our borough, and money that we had to mitigate our own housing, pretty much all of the mitigation has not been delivered. And when we started this process with the local plan 2017, before it was adopted, we had the Fountain Junction as part of our requirements, and it seems absolutely desperately bad that as a borough we haven't got any plan for the Fountain Junction, and yet we've got this enormous quantum of housing, and Tunbridge and Malling's mitigation is being funded by Maidstone. I mean, I really find it unjust that there can't be some sort of quid pro quo. I know that ultimately depends on KCC rather than Tunbridge and Malling, but you know, it's not lost on us how impacted we've been by this development, and will continue to be while the schemes have been funded that were in our part. So I just thought I'd raise that just as a point. The other thing that is really disappointing when we sort of consider the opportunities at Allington is that Allington, if you visit the site, many people here probably have, but if you visit that site, it's well worth it. But when you get to see all access to that site and you go to the roof, you've got these enormous radiators that fill up the roof, desperately trying to dissipate heat, because these incinerators are designed to be in a central town or city location, and the excess energy is free energy for businesses around them. It's part of the perk, and I find it's so terrible that we've got this scheme that was moved away from its design intention of being in an urban centre, at the point where there was no housing around it, and now all of a sudden we've got an enormous quantum of housing going in around it, and there's no plan to even retrospectively look at that and find a way that we could use some of that excess energy. So I just think that's such a missed opportunity, but the transport is galling.
Thank you, Councillor Spooner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's quite interesting to see what Tunbridge and Malling are up to. It's interesting to see that they are having as much trouble and as much vocal localisation to their local plan as Maidstone did to its local plan when it was being prepared. But the wonderful thing is Maidstone does have a local plan, an adopted one. Tunbridge and Malling haven't got anything, and it goes back to 2006. It's massively out of date. They have a chronically short housing land availability situation, and we need to keep a careful check on what Tunbridge and Malling are getting up to. The same with Medway. We need to watch very carefully what Medway Council are doing and what Tunbridge and Malling Council are doing. I agree entirely with what you say, Mr. Chairman, about Hermitage Lane. I don't know what went wrong, but 10, 15 years ago, there was an absolutely classic mess up between Tunbridge and Malling, Maidstone Borough and Kent County Council. Why there was not a proper road widening scheme or proper access, proper facilities provided, I do not know. I mean, I think it's a classic example of what goes wrong when you have a dispersed strategy. And that was one of the reasons why the last administration opted for the new settlements, because it provided an opportunity to provide that infrastructure first. And that is absolutely vital. Hermitage Lane is a classic example of what can go wrong, as indeed is the Sutton Road. You know, we've had over 2,000 houses built along Sutton Road, and not a single penny has been spent of all the 106 money that we've had. So looking at this, we need to keep a careful track on what happens in Tunbridge and Morley. I'm very pleased to see that we are objecting to the major housing proposals at Bunyards Farm and the other huge area, 1,300 houses, which I think that's the East Morley Research Station site. It is massive. But Tunbridge and Morley do have a massive shortfall to make up. And a lot of it is going to impact on Maidstone. And that is why we have to keep a careful track on what's going on. I think the officers have done a very good job in picking up the issues that we need to follow up. I can't think of anything else. We need to keep a careful track on what's going on. I am fearful, though, because of the woeful lack of an up-to-date local plan in Tunbridge and Morley, a lot of those housing decisions are going to be made by the Secretary of State. And, you know, there's one Ivy Farm, I think that's gone to a public inquiry a few months ago. I will be highly surprised if that is not allowed on appeal. And I think the same could happen to other housing sites in Tunbridge and Morley, and they will obviously have massive impacts upon Maidstone. So I think the officers have done a good job on the comments that they've made. I have nothing further to add. And I think that's all I need to say, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Dennis. Claire, I didn't know if you wanted to say anything because of sort of local council to the area.
I think my concerns have been raised by yourself and by other people, because East Farley School, when the bridge was shut for whatever reason, whichever time, blah, 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 infrastructure, don't get me started, it became clear that people are coming from Barming to East Farley School. So this pushing in is coming southwest as well. It's coming over the river. And, you know, change happens and houses need to be built. I mean, the main concern, I know the councils that sort of are bordering the river have been looking at it and would have sent their objections off. And there's maybe more of a view issue at Wateringbury. But again, it's infrastructure, and people are going to avoid town and come through our old medieval bridges again, and then are going to come down to Yalding onto that medieval bridge again to bypass town. And it is a huge problem, as everybody said. But yeah, no, I think we need to object to it as strongly as we can. What I was just going to check was points 34 and 35, are they deliberately blank? There's no, I don't know if it's a misprint in mine, but points 34 and 35 on page 153, it doesn't say yes, no, or regret. I don't think it's not necessarily pertinent to our objections, but they are blank. I'm sure somebody's picked that up. It might be. I've got an old copy, but thank you.
Thank you for that, Claire. And you raised a good point in terms of bridges across the river, because once we go downstream or upstream rather from the town, they're all pretty. I mean, you've got East Farley Bridge, Teeston Bridge, and when you go around to sort of Watering, they're all pretty old medieval bridge. I mean, there's very little in the way of any modern river crossing at all on that river. I just want to know, whilst I suppose most of it is within our, well, no, it's the boundary, isn't it, between us and Tunbridge and Morley. So whether it's worth feeding back in terms of infrastructure, that they should perhaps look at a modern river crossing at some point to take the pressure off the medieval bridges, which have suffered damage on numerous occasions through, you know, juggernauts and all the rest of it, hitting the parapets and all the rest of it. And the other thing which I think Councillor Brian Clark mentioned, perhaps we should feedback about district heating, because if they're wanting to do any expansion in the 2020 estate, there are opportunities to either look at retrofitting or if they do, although we're objecting to it, but if the Bunyards was to go ahead and some of those other developments, to actually do district heating from the incinerator. Sure.
Yeah, just to quickly come back on that point, there is a planning application in from the incinerator for a district heating network. primarily to come into Maidstone to serve bigger the bigger organisations. But that planning application was put in about a month ago, maybe 2 months ago. It's quite an impressive setup they want to do.
That's an interesting update. Thanks, Stuart. So if we go to whatever page it is, page 139. Oh, sorry, Councillor Povey.
Yeah, if I could just briefly, I totally endorse the concerns over Hermitage Lane. I went to Mason Hospital yesterday actually for an oncology appointment, and the traffic along that road now, you've got that awful junction at the top with, I think it's Aldi and McDonald's, is it there? And, you know, that's an ambulance route from the M20, and you know, there's going to be unnecessary fatalities if we're not careful. And the other point, of course, is about the river crossing. I'm only endorsing what other people have said, but living in Harrietsham, when I come out of the hospital, quite often I go over East Farley and then through Tovel and up the Sutton Road and then up to Warm Lake and turn left and come home that way. And I'm probably not the only one. So I sort of share, you know, as there's more and more development in that area, you know, a lot of people are going to head down through towards sort of Headcorn out that way, and you know, traffic needs to be managed. So nothing new. I'm just really enforcing what other people have said. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. Okay, so the recommendations on page 139, which is that Maidstone Council's draft response to Tunbridge and Malling Borough Council local plan regulation 18 consultation attached in appendix 1 of the report be approved for submission to Tunbridge and Malling Borough Council, and perhaps if, you know, the cabinet member can take and the officers take on board the points raised in tonight's meeting as well when they send that in. So is everyone happy with that recommendation? Yeah, great, thank you. That takes us then on to our last item tonight, which Jen's been patiently waiting for, which is item number 14, which is Earl Street Public Realm Improvement Scheme, kicking up on page 164 and 165, plus the confidential appendix. So I'll ask Councillor Jeffrey if you'd like to introduce that, and then Jen, if you'd like to add on.
So this is really exciting. As we know, the nighttime economy has changed and the evening economy has changed in the town centre, as well as the general economy itself. We know that Earl Street has got the majority of restaurants and currently is mostly a road. There's a bit of outside seating at the top. I think it might be Fredericks have got some seats outside, and we really want to turn that space into our Eat Street, or as it's described here, restaurant quarter. I like Eat Street. So we pulled together. Jen's pulled together a plan which looks at the hospitality elements, the social connections, and also the greening of that area. We need to make sure that we've got ability for deliveries. That's the key for sort of feedback from the businesses there, is that they want to make sure that they can get those deliveries in. But at the same time, make sure we're able to facilitate that outside dining area, the entertainment space, and enhance the heritage and environment aspects of it. We've got informal support from Highways Authority. I certainly had a conversation with the corporate director a couple of months ago, probably a month ago, and mentioned it there, and everyone's really excited about it. There'll be substantial engagement with and in consultation with businesses and residents to make sure that you know, we've refined this in absolutely the best way, and we want to make sure we've got this underway before LGR hits, because this is going to be a big and exciting project that we don't want to see scuppered. So making sure we've got all the plans in place as we go forward will be really good. And Jen's here to answer all the detail.
think I just wanted to say this really is an exciting project for both me and my team. We've started with some of the greening projects. You'll see the lamp columns, this work in Jubilee Square. We're still working on the pocket parks. That's taken a little bit longer just because of the complexity of utilities. So we are cutting our teeth on some of the smaller projects. This is the next big thing. We know the other phases that have happened with, you know, the creation of Jubilee Square, Remembrance Square. And we really want to build upon that. And I think Earl Street lends itself to that. It has that opportunity to have a big sort of entrance off of Week Street and that connection with Fremnes Walk, and then really build down to the river and the vistas that can go that way. And I think there's just lots of opportunity there, and we're very excited.
Thank you for that. Before I take Councillor Russell, I just wondered if Councillor Greener wanted to say anything as the ward member for High Street here tonight.
Yeah, I totally agree with the proposal, obviously, to look at and just think about the design. It's quite often mentioned by people, why don't we have a nice area where we can sit outside and eat? And it is starting to be seen very much as sort of the restaurant quarter around that area. I'm really confident with Jen looking after the project. She puts everything behind every project she's run since I've been working with the council. And I know she'll make it a really good project for the town going forward.
I'll come to you in a minute, Stephen. Councillor Russell.
Thank you. I'm glad that Councillor Jeffrey mentioned the point about deliveries, because that is my concern, how the businesses will get deliveries in that area. I think it's exciting. I'm absolutely not in favour of waving someone off with that capital budget on these 5 or 6 pages. And that's not saying that I'm not in favour of looking at it, going down that route. I think where you've got point number 5, more than happy to say about, you know, have the £100,000 to get it looked at, get it to the point where it's costed up. But I can see vision. I can see that. What I can't actually see on these pages, though, is what you actually intend to do. And so there's just no way. I think that's a great idea to go into the sunset with the capital budget. I think, you know, if I was doing any kind of project, I'd be like, what is it that I want to do? Scope it out. What does it look like? Get a plan, get that costed, come back and see how much that is. I mean, also, I'd say on a small, I don't know why I've gone so loud there, on a smaller point where it says create outdoor dining areas, I think, you know, you can't favour these businesses over other businesses. You can create favourable spaces for outdoor dining, but I'm not sure how far you'd be taking that. I mean, I would assume that it'd be for the businesses to actually kit those out with tables, chairs and whatnot. I wouldn't see that that would be part of the budget. But it's things like that. I think it just needs buttoning down with actual costings available, because I think if you've got this budget, I wouldn't be surprised if any costings come in 1 penny below the total capital budget. That's just me being a cynic. But I just, you know, I think we need more detail. Thank you.
So, Councillor Thompson, and I've got a couple of points to read.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Following on from Councillor Greenan, and to repeat the point that I made earlier about the briefing we had in Cabinet today on the updated indices of multiple deprivation, this area is in the heart of Maidstone 004H, lowest super output area, where there is considerable deprivation for the families that live here. So while I'm delighted with 2.7 and 2.8, the draft vision and the project objectives, it occurs to me that it would be good if we could include a specific mention for local residents in 2.7 and consideration in the design features in 2.8 for factors like light spill, sound reflecting surfaces and other specific design engineering issues for pertaining to the quality of life for residents. Councillor Jeffrey mentioned that they'd be consulted, and I'm sure many more ideas will come forward. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. I mean, I think it's a very good. I think it's a good that we do work on Earl Street, because it would link in with the work we did a few years ago on Week Street when we did the repaving and the scheme there, and the High Street, and also work done on Gabriel's Hill. So this would sort of complete all the main streets in the town centre in terms of giving them a fairly fresh look and improve. One of the things I think we should, and I know it's in here, but in paragraph 2.3 it really highlights it, doesn't it? But I was actually I did remember that there were 2 trees there at the very top end of the road, because when you look at Earl Street now, I mean, there's greenery doesn't really exist apart from 2 trees in the middle of the paving at the top end of it. So I think there has to be a big opportunity in terms of taking a project forward to either bring some more trees into the environment or planters or something just to soften it. Because if we want sort of an outdoor dining experience, and you think of places which work well, they're in fairly green environments, and Earl Street, as it is now, is a pretty sterile environment. So I think it would be really worth looking into those aspects of it. And one of the things I did ask Jen at my briefing was to some extent picking up what Councillor Russell was saying, but it was about the timetable. So I think if we look on page paragraph 217 on page 173, we can see that when we get to the sort of probably either the June or the July cycle this year, that there will be a report coming back to the Policy Advisory Committee and the Cabinet, looking at what's actually being designed, what the concept actually has been worked up to, which will give us a better feel again for how much something may or may not cost. Clearly, I mean, I don't think anyone wants to go into the yellow paper, so we don't need to discuss any figures tonight. But the other thing I was keen to, and I understand that we will be doing a sort of tendering on where it sort of says technical design. So in the autumn, it's a plan to tender, because again, my concern on a scheme of this is that if we're not careful, we don't get it tendered, and if you like, the contract signed by, I suppose, the end of this year, we'll be stuck because of the size of it. But the timetable we've got to at the moment gives us a bit of scope, because if we're planning to sort of go out to tender in the autumn, there is a little bit of leeway in timing there. But it is a tight timetable. But if we can deliver this, it will be one of perhaps potentially, if we get it right, a legacy project for the Borough Council in terms of helping to improve physically how the town centre looks like. Go to Councillor Russell first, and then I'll go to Councillor Jeffries.
Okay, I was just thinking, my point is just keeping control of costs. I mean, after all, that is, I assume, one of our remits of what we're here to do, because we could do this, or we could build houses for people that need them. It's all choices, isn't it? So all I'm saying is, why don't we agree 0.5, have the £100,000, get the concept design and development for Earl Street done, then that was not going to break any of this timeline. Bring it back to the pack where you're saying report to pack cabinet June, July, bring it back to the pack with the amount.
Councillor Conyard and then Councillor Green, or was it Green and then Conyard? Richard.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to say I concur with Councillor Russell on this. Happy, the vision is fantastic, everything. I'm sure it's going to be absolutely brilliant, but would just like that little bit of extra oversight. It's in the timetable. I would say, rather than necessarily not voting for 0.4 of the recommendations, if that were to be amended slightly after where it says necessary contract documentation and then maybe subject to review by PAC and Cabinet, then I would hope that would give everybody's concerns and align both the timetable and the recommendations.
Green.
I was just going to ask if it would be possible. Obviously, this is quite a big project. We're all really interested in what's going to happen and seeing the proposals. I'm also aware that we may have a lot of other work to do with the committee over the summer. So would it be possible to have some sort of briefing or something maybe before we come to the June, July meeting? I'm not sure which date it's on, so that we can actually go through the proposals with Jen, understand it, go through any questions, because I could imagine we could all spend probably 2 hours talking about the proposals during the committee meeting otherwise.
Good point. Councillor Jeffrey, did you want to come back?
Yeah, there's a few points there that have been raised. I mean, in terms of the detail, well, that's why we need the £100,000 to start working up the detail and so forth. There's obviously a number of waypoints within any project plan that need to be gone through. I think that the points from Councillor Greenan around engagement, particularly around the ward members, clearly, yeah, that can be done quite happily, and would be part of the consultation anyway. But you know, doing it specifically with ward members would be good. So the other key point was around LGR and the Section 24 notice. One of the reasons for getting this headline agreement in place is so we can avoid the Section 24 notice saying you can't do it. It gives us the budget to move ahead. The control on that budget is a separate issue, but it means that we can progress no matter what that letter, that Section 24 notice says. And if it says you can't do it, and we haven't quite signed off that we want to put the money towards it, we could find ourselves in a real pickle. So I'm rather keen that we get the headlines agreed and get this moving, and make sure that the control on the spending is done through appropriate project management, waypoints, checkpoints, and so forth. So you know, there is a time issue here. I just wondered, there was a question on the greening aspect, and I think Jen, you would be keen to just put a bit more feedback on that.
Absolutely, greening I think is at the heart of what we want to do with this. The project came out of what was already planned with, as I said, Jubilee Square greening, with the pocket parks that are coming out. Now, part of the pocket parks plan is it had to contain trees. It's not just some raised beds and some, you know, a little bit of superficial planting. It had to be trees, and they had to be in the ground, and that's very much then the ethos we will take into this project. It's not about just prettifying, you know, a few hanging baskets or something that doesn't have real value. It will be about putting things in the ground. It will be about, we mentioned SUDs in there, so sustainable urban drainage, putting everything in. So that's why the cost is quite a lot for that part of the road, because it will involve quite a lot of, you know, civil engineering work underground to be able to incorporate all of that. And that's where things couldn't happen in previous phases of the development along sort of Week Street, because it is just so expensive to be able to dig out, put the trees in, build the utilities around it. But it's fundamental. If we can put elements of, you know, like what we've got with the lamp columns, with green walls we've heard mentioned tonight, absolutely that should be part of it. And we've already started discussions with some of the businesses, and I know earlier it was mentioned about the grants for the sort of floral aspects to the businesses. It's about linking all of those aspects and bring it all together. So if there is a seating area, then certainly shade is a key part of that, and if we can do that through natural, you know, with trees, you know, so there's not the need for umbrellas or things like that in the summer, then that's what we should be working on. So it is fundamentally part of the plan. So that's why it's one of the higher parts in the objectives, to make sure that that's delivered.
Thank you for that, Jen. Before I come to Councillor Clark, I'm just wondering, and I understand what Councillor Jeffrey was saying in terms of the concern on the Section 24 notice, because as you know, I've batted on about it a couple of times today and yesterday and at the previous council meeting. I just wondered, in terms of recommendation 4, whether adding on, so it says on the terms as agreed, subject to review by Policy Advisory Committee / Cabinet, given that you're reporting back on this to Policy Advisory Committee and Cabinet in the June-July cycle, that, you know, that would give you the authority to start the work, but give us a chance to just do a review of it in June, July, where we can just do a final sense check as to where the work you will have done may have led because whilst you've got a figure at the moment in the yellow papers, as we work through the concept design and so on, I mean, and as Claudine's right, I mean, the history of public procurement often means things tend to float up because the private sector tends to quote lies. I think they can get away with them. I always remember the toilet block in Moat Park, which went up from £250,000 to almost £500,000. But the prices could go down, you know, until we've actually got that stage. We don't know if that's the right sort of figure, whether we might need more or it could be done for less. So that's why I think it was Richard's point, saying that if it's subject to review by us and Cabinet, it just builds in that safeguard. And sorry, I just wanted to know, the question then was, how would that stop anything? Because you would have, you know, we've given an outline thing in terms of a figure, but we want to finally review it in 6 months' time or 5 months' time.
I'm happy to have that further discussion with the Director of Governance in terms of the potential risks around that, and we'll certainly consider it.
Councillor Clark.
So, I mean, I was on the same lines, really. Councillor Conyard mentioned a concern about item 4, and as I read it, my thoughts were that we would go through this process, and we'd get to this point where we've agreed the concept, or we've members and the public have had a chance to consider what we can do there, and then this is the sort of nailing it down and moving forward. So I think the Richard's point, I think, was more to do with, if that was to happen right at the beginning, and potentially the way it's worded, it could imply that, then it looks like members are being sort of cut out. So I do just wonder whether just a small change to this, which might just say, you know, once stage X has passed, the authority designated legal advisors, because this is about construction, and there is a point where we have to look at what we're going to do, and then we go into construction. I'm just thinking that, is there an impact to this programme, and considering local government reorganisation, if we strap this to one of the milestones and keep everything exactly the same? Because I do think that we should be ambitious. I think we should move forward with this, and I don't want to sort of kill it by sort of being, can I say, onerous. So I'd be interested in officers' views. If this was just to change, that this would come into being at a certain milestone in 2.17, would that jeopardise the programme?
I think it's specifically the milestone of reporting to PAC and Cabinet, that it's all wrapped up at that. Just for clarity, obviously, where we were talking about the capital sum and making sure it's in the capital budget, because obviously that's already been through here tonight, and there is a line in there that incorporates a few other bits and pieces. So there's a bigger sort of budget line, and this was just ensuring that there's sort of a marker against that this is where that's coming from. So I don't think there's any issue under 2.17, as you said. The report to PAC is the point where you've got the engagement, as you'll see later in the words in the report. It says about bringing the report back to look at the outline, the concept design and the stakeholder engagement and all of that, which at that point it's all wrapped up to say, this is what everyone has said, this is the concept that has been produced, and this is the indicative costs of that, and a final yes, but whilst at the same time keeping that budget pot there and aligned with this project.
Just to clarify, so if we were to say that the authorities, sorry?
I would have thought just adding subject to review by Policy Advisory Committee / Cabinet, because picking up Jen's point, when we approved or recommended to the Cabinet the capital budget earlier tonight, on page 74, we've got a generic thing relating to the town centre. So public realm and greening relating to the town centre. And there's a total figure there. Obviously, this project falls within that. So we don't need to be any more prescriptive, because obviously that money is going to fund multiple things, one of which is this. So I would have thought, if, subject to review by Policy Advisory Committee and Cabinet, looking at the timetable, would be sort of the June period when you've done all your consultation and you should know what you're wanting to definitely do.
I mean, can the officer perhaps suggest how we could sort of square this in item 4? Do we need to put the time, the indicative time scale? I mean, that's very limiting, because we, as members, we may want to change those times, or we may want to, things may happen. So I don't know if we want to be that prescriptive in this agreement, but what can we put in item 4 that would just make it very clear that that's not happening right at the beginning of this project, as in tomorrow? The Director of Finance and Resources, we're giving authorization for them to negotiate and complete the necessary contract documentation. Without any other wording, that almost implies that it could happen tomorrow. So I'm just wondering if we could have a suggestion for wording.
I've got 3 other people, but I'm just wondering, does it make sense, because we're getting a bit tongue-tied here over wording, if we just sort of adjourn for 10 minutes to try to work out, or 5 minutes even, to try to, no? Oh, okay, all right, if you, yeah, okay, well, Councillor Russell and Councillor Keane and Councillor Conyard.
If you look at page 165, which are the recommendations, 1 is fine, so keep 1, delete 2, 3 and 4, and then go straight to 5. That gives you the £100,000 to go ahead to do the concept design and development ahead of final approval. And then you've just got to put by the portfolio holder, blah, 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 and pack. Then you've got, and you can do, when you come back in exactly meeting these timelines in June and July, which you've got on here, where it says report to pack Cabinet anyway, you can put the new report in, whatever that is, and you can clear up items 2, 3, 4 and whatever in that. I mean, you've got the capital budget coming in February anyway, so if there's a line in there for your capital budget, you've done the paperwork side of things. All I'm saying is, the way this is written here, it looks like we're saying, please go and take the money and spend it. So I think it would work with 1 and 5, delete 2, 3, 4, come back in accordance with your timeline, and then you can do the further recommendations then.
Just come back on that quick point.
Yeah, okay.
In terms of point 3, the procurement bid is around getting the consultants in for the 100k rather than the final bit. But I mean, just in general, I mean, I'm hearing what you're saying, and yeah, we'll take whatever you come up with. We'll take those points and discuss. So I'm not pushing back particularly.
Could we do 1, 3 and 5 then? Because, yeah, well, I mean, the contracts would be in 3 would be linked to the £100,000 we've approved, which is what they need to do to go ahead and get all the work done. Once that's done, then they can come back to us in June, July, effectively with a fairly reasonably costed scheme, and then we can give you, then if we choose at that point to proceed, we can give you approval to these other points, and we're not preempting anything, we're not slowing anything down. As you say, it's in the capital project, in the capital budget, so the officers are, and that way we get what, we get the sense check we want. So is that I can see Jen's nodding, that obviously would work for the officers. So is everybody happy that perhaps that's the option, that it's recommendations 1, 3 and 5 tonight, and then we look at the thing when they come back in the early summer. Yeah, everybody, I mean, that seems, I don't see anybody sort of shaking.
Well, can we just to be sure, does that work? My concern that I raised earlier is that I don't want this to, be a nail in the coffin. can we go forward with that as the proposal in terms of funding secured moving forward?
So what I've said a couple of times is we'll take. I understand the concept that and accept the concept that you're coming forward with. I want to just check it with Angela in terms of Director of Governance and obviously Mark to make sure that what you're suggesting fits within the LGL timescales and works within the overall project plan. But yeah, I get it. So we will need to make sure we've done the extra loop on it.
Given that we're just sort of recommending to the cabinet, perhaps if we recommend, as we've just said, what item recommendation 1, 3 and 5, and that's what we recommend. And then when you're in the cabinet, you can obviously have that discussion with Adrian and with Mark to check if that enables us to do what we need to do now, but doesn't prevent the whole project. Yeah. So if everybody's happy with that approach, Richard.
Thank you, Chair. Just a very quick one that may help over this. Obviously, 1, 3 and 5, absolutely happy for those checks. I mean, we all want to see this happen from the sounds of things. Maybe to update point 1, where it says the vision, headline, objectives, we're all happy with those, and the timeline, because it then references what the recommendations are directly to the report. So the timeline is in there, and the timeline guarantees that it comes back to cabinet. But no other one of the recommendations does it actually state specifically that it would be coming back to PAC. So does that make sense to anyone?
Yeah. I think that's quite good. So number 1 then, if everybody's happy, is that would be the vision and headline objectives for the project and timeline be agreed. Yeah. So just adding in and timeline there. So I'll move that with that amendment to number 1, that we adopt recommendation 1, 3 and 5. And I can see that's been seconded. So is everybody happy on that? Or do we need to? Yeah, agreed? Great. Smashing. Thank you. And I look forward to seeing this project going forward in a good, timely manner. Thank everybody for coming, and hopefully your journeys home on the pavements will be safe tonight.